Aloha, it's CreativeNameToStandOut again with another battle report. This time I'm bringing you a 2,500 point game between my Dark Elves and an opponent's Orcs and Goblins. So instead of playing a normal mission like we usually do, which is battle line, we decided to mix things up a bit and just make up a mission and play it like that. But don't worry, it's not complicated. It's just that there's 3 pieces of terrain, and each terrain piece is worth 1 point. So here in the picture, you can see in the right corner there is a forest. Then in the center there's a lake, and then in the left corner next to my black dragon you might see a statue. These are the 3 pieces of terrain. The way you claim them is having a unit with fortitude within 3 inches and being the only player that does that. If both players manage to do that, then that terrain piece is contested and you don't get the points. So at the end of the game, whoever has the most terrain pieces wins the game. So there's 3 points on the table. All you need to do is claim more than your opponent does. So with that out of the way, let's go into deployment. Starting on my left flank, we have 5 Dark Riders, a Cold Wind Chariot, then a unit of Witches, the Cauldron of Blood, and then another Cold Wind Chariot. Then moving down towards the center, we have my large block of Dread Spears. Inside that unit will be my level 4 of Dark. Then we have my Black Dragon. Then we have a unit of Executioners with a level 3 of Life, and my BSB, Master BSB. And then finally at the end, we have my Doomfire Warlocks. Moving over to Orc deployment, we have an Ragnarok, a small unit of Night Goblins with short bows. Behind there is a Doomdiver Catapult. Then a horde of Night Goblins. Inside that unit will be Skarsnik and a level 2 Night Goblin Shaman. Moving over, we have a Night Goblin bus with sword and shield. Behind there is the Goblin Catapult. Moving over a bit more, we have a horde of Savage Orcs, and they have the little level 2 Orc Shaman in there that increases their ward save by 1. We have 2 giant squigs, another Doomdiver Catapult, and then finally on the far right we have a large squig herd. Dark Elves win the roll off to go first, and here we go. So as you can see in the right corner there in the red, I had the points labeled. Those will now be tracking when we control a piece of terrain rather than our victory points, since victory points don't really matter in this game. So we're pushing everything forward pretty aggressively, more so on the right than on the left. The big thing here is I'm leading my fast cav into their deaths by putting the Dark Riders on top of one of the giant squigs. And then over here I bring the Warlocks over here to trigger off some Fanatics, and unfortunately for me, there's actually only 1 Fanatic between these 2 units. So that either means all the Fanatics are in the bus, or my opponent didn't bring any Fanatics. So we go into the magic phase. Low dice, usually love that, means I usually get a spell off, but unfortunately I failed to cast Power of Darkness. Probably should have played that second either way, and then he dispels Throne of Vines. So with that we go into the Orcs turn, and this is Orcs turn 1. The Orcs and Goblin player isn't very aggressive. He moves the bus up forward a bit, and as sure enough they have all the Fanatics in there. We have his short bows edge up a bit also, and then the spider is making its way slowly through the left flank. We jump into the magic phase, and as usual I put the dice pool results there for you to see, but you also have to understand these are Night Goblins, so they're always going to get an extra dice when they cast a spell, so that's why the numbers won't match up perfectly. The big thing here is he gives his short bows poison, and then he makes me use up my Dispel Scroll trying to stop the Foot of Gork. Other than that, not a whole bunch of stuff happens. He gets off a couple spells I stop, and some that don't matter. The combination of poisoned arrow shots and the Doomdiver Catapult kill off my Doomfire Warlocks. Then another Doomdiver Catapult puts a wound on my Black Dragon. And with that, we look at both sides of the board, here on the left, and then here on the right. And we pull back, and we start going into Dark Elf turn 2. Turn, I'm caught in a standstill. I don't want to move my Witches up forward because he didn't move his Orcs forward, so there's really no reason to. The only thing that's going to happen is I'll push myself closer to that squig, and that will just make it extremely easy for him to hit me, which is not that big of a deal. The big problem there is if he hits me and I'm more central to the board, that means his squig will go wild more central to the board. And I want to control the center of the board without having to worry about a crazy squig bouncing around. So I'm going to stay back just a bit to where he can still hit me, but when he passes through my unit, he's going to be way on the other side of the table. He'll be over here in my deployment zone, and that'll allow me to move forward, control the center of the board, and not have to worry too much, unless he just rolls really lucky, about a crazy squig moving around. Over on the left flank, however, I'm anchored here. As you can see, I moved my spearmen up a bit to kill off 2 of those fanatics to protect my black dragon. But yeah, those fanatics pretty much just kept me from being terribly aggressive. I could have charged, I guess, the Night Goblins and then get hit with all 3 fanatics, but I didn't like the idea of that. So I sit on 2 of them. And then the last thing is that the executioners are anchored on my terrain piece, just like his squigs are anchored on his. And so I'm caught at a standstill, and with that we go into the magic. Now magic is pretty much a failure. I get a good amount of dice, you know, the low amount I like, but unfortunately I roll a 1 again for Power of Darkness. I then surprisingly fail Throne of Vines on 3, and then that leaves him to easily dispel ultimately a spell that didn't matter. And that brings us into Orcs and Goblins turn 2. And here we see his Night Goblins charge my Dread Spears. I'm thinking he probably thought they were weak enough now that they took 2 fanatics worth of damage. So that's pretty aggressive, but everywhere else pretty much stays the same. The squig hopper, or the giant squig, does make it through my witches, which is good. Now it's going to go crazy, hopefully in my deployment zone, and not gravitate towards the center of the board. And then he brings his spider further on the left flank, and now my bolt thrower is pretty much going to die next turn. We go into Orcs and Goblins turn 2, and the magic phase was just crazy. First of all, he gets boxcars, then he gets to add 1 dice to all his spells that are Night Goblin spells, and then he can steal dice from me if I don't successfully stop him, or if I choose not to stop him, and he did. So he probably generated a ton of dice. I don't know, maybe 16 dice in this magic phase, and it was crazy. So luckily, even though he had a lot of stuff going on, it was a pretty busy phase, I managed to stop anything that was terribly powerful, or he just fails it on his own. And that brings us into the shooting phase, where he puts on a couple wounds to my dragon and my character from some Doom Divers. And then the catapult takes aim at the witches and does a couple wounds there. And then after that we go into combat. So we're in this combat. The Goblins do have the armor piercing rule because of one of the spells he cast. I'm not really worried about this. The only thing that's concerning is that I'm probably going to be stuck here for the rest of the game. So we go straight into combat, and surprisingly enough, out of 15 attacks, I kill 13 Night Goblins, and that's just from Dread Spears. So I was pretty surprised about that, very happy about it. I lose a couple, maybe 1 or 2. He's steadfast and sticks. So here we go into Dark Elf turn 3, and the first thing I do is reform these executioners. It's going to give my opponent a really hard decision. If he charges that bolt thrower, I'm going to get in combat with him. If he doesn't, I'm going to shoot him with a bolt thrower. Now, of course, the bolt thrower has been missing all game, but I don't know. It's a tough decision, I'm sure, and at least the bolt thrower is going to be helpful in that regard. So on the other side of the table, I start spreading away from the Mangler Squigs. The one chariot on the left moves towards the combat to help them out. The chariot on the right fails a stupidity test and just kind of bumps forward a bit. And then of course I bring the witches up. They're in a perfect position. They're pretty good distance away from the Mangler Squig. For it to move randomly and get back into them is highly unlikely. And then those orcs are going to have a tough time making it to the witches. They can make it, but it's a fairly long charge. So we go into the magic phase. I once again, and now I'm just being stubborn, I try to cast Power of Darkness on 1 dice. I'm determined to get it off on 1 dice. I fail, and that pretty much ruins my entire magic phase as everything else gets dispelled. So despite the fact I have 7 levels of magic, I'm just not doing very well with it. So we go into the shooting phase, and the Black Dragon and Master blow fire on the large horde of Night Goblins and kill them in droves. We then move over to the bolt thrower. I shoot, I actually hit, and not only do I hit, I do the max number of wounds, which is 3, and that's probably really just going to force his hand now. If beforehand it was a tough decision, he's probably thinking, I don't want this to happen again, I'm definitely going to charge it. So then we go into combat. It's not going to happen out like last time. I'm not going to hit with like 98% of my attacks, but I do win combat either way. He does stick because he's steadfast. So just in case you forgot to check out the right corner there about points, I have 2 pieces of terrain, the middle lake and the statue, while he controls the forest. So we go into the charges. He of course charges with the spider into my bolt thrower, but don't worry, I got those executioners still positioned to take him out once he's done. Over here, his Orcs and Goblins declare a charge against the witches and the large herd of squigs. Surprisingly, declare a charge also against the chariot. He needs a 10 for both of these, and unfortunately for me, he makes it with one of them. So the Savage Orcs are in combat with the witches. I don't know how this is going to go. This great Mangler Squig, just by a hair, misses my chariot. Really thankful that missed. And then the Night Goblin horde turns to face my Black Dragon because I had a flank charge if he stayed where he was. In the magic phase, not a lot happened. He rolled a 1 on his magic mushroom, causing him to fail the spell. And then we go into combat. So, again, like I said, I don't know how this is going to go, but I go ahead and strike first, and I do about 12 wounds against the orcs. That's pretty impressive. But unfortunately, in retaliation, he kills, I think, all but one of my witches, and of course, the chariot itself. So that leaves me on double ones, and I, of course, fail. He runs the chariot down, and then runs into the chariot that failed its stupidity test. In the other combat between the Dread Spears and the Night Goblins, I, of course, win again. He's just barely steadfast, and therefore he sticks. So maybe next turn, I'll run the chariot in there, and I'll finally get rid of them. That brings us to our last combat, and then subsequently my next turn, where the Ragnarok goes into combat with the Bolt Thrower, easily crushes it, and then in my turn I charge the Ragnarok. So if I don't kill this spider outright, I'm fairly confident I'm just going to win this through combat res, and pretty much not worried about it. Then the chariot slams into the flank of the Night Goblins, who are holding up my Dread Spears, and I send the Black Dragon into that War Machine in the back behind the horde that turned to face me. So we go into my magic phase, and I count victory. I get off Power of Darkness finally on the 4th try on 1 dice. It, of course, gets dispelled, but, you know, still, I did it. And then it allows me to get Throne of Vines off. It helps me get rid of his Dispel Scroll. And then finally, I get a lucky Word of Pain off on the spider just to erase any doubt that I was going to lose that combat. So we go into the shooting phase, or actually I don't have a shooting phase, we go straight into combat, and my executioners do what needs to be done. I just outright kill the spider, and then with the help of the chariot, I'm able to, chase off these Night Goblins, and I run them down with the chariot. So we go into the last 2 combats of the turn, and that's going to have the War Machine get crushed by the Black Dragon, and the Orcs are going to take care of this chariot. He's going to reform, and we're going to go to turn 4. So as he reforms, I'm ahead 2-0 because his Squig herd moved away from the trees, and he hasn't gotten a chance yet to move this Orc horde next to the river, next to this lake that I own with the Dread Spears. And of course, I still own the statue with the executioners. So, he goes into random movements. The Mangler Squig surprisingly goes through his own Orc unit, kills a ton of them. That's going to be helpful in any other circumstance, that is. But in this certain situation, I don't really have anything that can handle those Orcs. So I'm in a tough position. I need to somehow capture 2 pieces of terrain while at the same time avoid confronting this horde directly. Making things more difficult for me is the fact that he has another unit on the other side of the lake that's converging in the center of the table. So not only do I have to keep the orcs in check, but I also have to make sure I keep track of all his other units. So I'm in a pretty tough position here as we go into the magic phase. In the magic phase, he's going to cast a low-level Curse of the Bad Moon. It's going to go off irresistibly, and it's going to roll up initiative. So it's going to go through my Spearman unit. I lose 4, but that's about it. And he's probably going to he's definitely going to let this collapse because it's initiative and he has too many orcs around. I look at the table a bit and I decide there's just really no way I can win this game. The only thing I can do is not lose it. So I decide I'm going to go for a tie. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to charge these Night Goblins for a couple of reasons. 1, to get rid of them as a threat, and to 2, get my scoring unit here, the spears, away from those orcs, so I have more time to save them until the end to just run in there and grab that lake at the last second. So that's what I do. I charge this unit with all 3. It's going to be major overkill. We go into magic. I cast Flesh of Stone off. I have it asterisk because I cast the big spell. That's going to protect my spearman, and it's also going to heal a wound for my dragon. He stops my other spell, and we go into combat where, like I said, easily kill off that unit, and now I'm far away enough from the orcs to still be a threat to capture the lake, but not actually be in range to be wiped out by those orcs. Here we go into Orcs and Goblins turn 5. You can see that the Sorceress and the Night Goblin Shaman are still positioned in that challenge they got into in the combat. We just forgot to put them back in their places. And this turn is just really about solidifying positions. He's going to keep his Orcs in close proximity to the lake. He's going to keep his Squig herd back towards the forest. And he's going to bring his Shortbow Goblins up with the rest of my units. In the magic phase, he's going to just go for the poison shots on the Shortbow Goblins and get that off successfully. and then he's going to start unloading artillery onto my executioners. I think he's getting a sense of what's about to happen, and so he's trying to panic the executioners off the board. So here we go into Dark Elf turn 6, and I execute my little crafty plan here. Well, crafty, like my desperate plan that I have no other choice to do. And so I move my Dread Spears up, and I control the lake, just like he controls the lake, so it's a tie there. And then I move my Black Dragon up to kind of just block the way. So there's really no way he's going to be able to kill my Dread Spears unless, of course, something crazy in magic and shooting happens. And I'm pretty much safe. In the magic phase, I cast Flesh of Stone up onto the Black Dragon just to protect the rider on top and to heal a wound off the Black Dragon. Just to do it, I guess, to make it tough for him. And pretty much that's all I do, and we go into his next turn. Now in his turn, he of course just charges the dragon to kill it, because why not? And he goes into his magic phase. And here he has his own crafty plan I didn't see. So he has been waiting until the last second to cast Hand of Gork, and he throws 6 dice at it, and luckily I stop it. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't realize that he wasn't just moving his short bow goblins up with my units. He was really just trying to get them in range so that a good Hand of Gork will be able to move them next to my statue and contest my statue. So pretty crafty plan, but unfortunately it was coming down to a roll-off. We had equal amount of dice, and I just happened to roll better than him. So, props to my opponent for the plan. It just didn't go his way. So with that, we go to the final combat. It doesn't really matter at this point, but I will point out that despite the fact that I am now toughness 10, he just wallops me. You can see that I have 4 additional wounds now on my dragon, maybe 3, I don't remember, but he did wound me quite a bit. I do a lot of damage back to him. I think I may have lost by 1, but I do stick. So it was a fun game. That's how it ends. We have a tie, as you can see. We both control the lake. He controls his forest. I control my statue. So there you have it. It was a tie. So I guess I'll end by extending this a little bit by answering Vince's topic of the week. Not much to really say, so I'm not going to make a whole video about it. If I could hope for anything in the next edition, it would definitely be for more missions that are kind of like this, that take away from the idea that you have to have victory point wins. I still want those, but I want a diversity of missions so that people will be forced to build a variety of lists that might be a little bit more balanced to cope with every situation. I'd really want to see people win games despite taking a devastating beating, sort of like maybe Warhammer's version of a Pyrrhic victory for people. You go around, you crush their army, but then you look at the table and you realize you lost. So, I think that would be a great dynamic for the game. So that's what I like to see in 9th edition. Again, I hope you enjoyed this bat rep. Please, I appreciate everybody's likes, comments, and subscriptions. And I'll see you guys again next week.